Hi, my name is Allie, and tonight I'm going to talk about suicide prevention. And I want to start by making the distinction between committing suicide and then suicidal ideation. Because a lot of times when it comes to suicide, people automatically assume it's just the act of taking your life. But there's actually a wider spectrum to it. Sometimes the language that's used is passive or active suicide or suicidal thoughts. And so on like the active end, or like committing suicide, that's actually taking steps to commit suicide. So like making a plan, writing a note, like all those steps to like actually doing the deed. Whereas with passive suicide, or even just suicidal ideation, it can kind of be like fantasizing about it, and it's just that constant like rumination of like thinking about it, thinking like like everybody would be better off if you weren't here, or whatever situation is so bad that it would be better for me to just end it. And just like constant cycling of those thoughts. And so like somebody who is struggling with suicidal thoughts can be anywhere on that spectrum. And so when people say things of like, oh, somebody is like acting suicidal for attention, that's just writing it off and not taking it seriously. And because you don't know where somebody might be on that spectrum, that's just, like, it's not good. Like, yes, there are cases where people, like, it is just acting out for attention, but you can't assume that. So any reference to suicide, anything like that, has to be taken seriously, and steps need to be taken to figure out where they are on that spectrum. And with that, a lot of times, like, the assumption is, oh, you can't talk about it directly, you can't ask anybody directly, because it might make them want to do it more. That's also not true. The only way you're going to figure out if they're in a more active or passive state is by asking those questions of like, are you thinking about suicide? Do you have a plan? Do you have the means to commit the act? Questions like that. And they're very hard questions to ask, but they're also very important. So that is one intervention, kind of prevention strategy, because you just need to know what you're dealing with. Because if they're active, then it's going to be like you need to do what you need to do so they'll be safe. But when it's more passive, then it might be able to be handled more in like a like outpatient kind of counseling setting. And so the main intervention that I want to talk about, you're probably is going to be geared more toward passive, and just like that rumination, or potentially later on after an attempt. It could also be used then. But it's something called a hope box or a hope kit. If you Google it, both of those pop up. But it's essentially just a container of some sort with items that the counselee values and reminds them of good memories, happy times, basically anything that would remind them of a reason to stay alive. And so, like, if I were to do it, something I would have in there, it's a Canes puck, because we're in North Carolina and I don't have any of my actual team here, but hockey, grew up going to hockey games. Hockey's really the only sport I pay attention to, so there's a lot of good memories for me wrapped up in hockey pucks. This little guy is something that I would also put in there, that my husband won for me at the North Carolina Fair. So that's also a good memory. But yeah, just things like that. and then having the counselee explain it to you and why it matters to them. And so then that way they have something tangible that they can grab onto in those really dark moments.